video is going to be an overview of the core infrastructure as well as the development environment for PointHarbor. So to start off with, just a description of this machine. It's a laptop with what I believe is a malfunctioning hard drive that is not accessible to my knowledge at this time. Booting from an Ubuntu CD with a 16 gigabyte USB drive. So you can basically burn an Ubuntu CD, and then no matter if you're running Windows, if you just like to try it, if you are in desperate need for another operating system, but it basically just runs off a CD without modifying anything else on your computer unless you specifically ask it to. So I've set my computer to boot from the CD drive in the BIOS instead of the hard drive, and then I've plugged in a 16 gigabyte USB drive. So usually when you buy the USB drives, they'll be formatted already for you. A lot of the times they're not formatted to support Linux permissions. If you are utilizing a USB drive for Linux, you'll want to go ahead and check that it supports Linux permissions, and you can do that by formatting it as ext3 or 4 or a similar file system. So if you would like to format your USB drive before getting started, go ahead and go into Disk Utilities, select your USB drive, and then click Format Drive. And from there you can name your drive and then select the file system that it formats it as. So once you select the name of your partition, you'll want to note this. This specific drive is, or the partition on this specific drive is PNY16. So once you have that format and you're ready to begin, you can go ahead and begin. First off, download Eclipse. I downloaded to the USB drive. Once you download it, it'll just be a zip file, so we can go ahead and look at that. So that's what it looks like when it's downloaded onto your USB drive. Also, in addition to Eclipse, there's a prerequisite that the JRE or AJRE be on the machine and accessible by Eclipse. So if you don't have that already, go ahead and download the JDK from Oracle, and then once you download the JDK, it'll again just be another zip file. So to start off with, I created a JVMS file, or a Java Machine Virtual Machines folder, and then I extracted the JDK into that folder. So Eclipse is a little bit more complicated to set up the first time, so we'll go ahead and walk through that specifically. So once you open the zip file, it'll go ahead and read the archive and then allow you to extract the archive. So if we click on extract, we can go ahead and create a new folder, just call it ph setup, and then we'll go ahead and extract that. So the reason why I suggest Eclipse is because it has integration features with OpenShift, which is they provide a free offering to get your web application up and running with a wide variety of options available to develop on. And then if you need to scale, they have paid subscriptions. So if you start receiving fairly heavy web traffic, you can go ahead and pay Red Hat to use a scaled option. So once we get Eclipse extracted, because of this setup and the fact that we're using a USB drive as well as a CD drive to boot, so basically the OS is static, there's a little modification required for Eclipse. So when we try to open it right now, it'll error and say that a Java runtime environment is required. So what you can go ahead and do is tell Eclipse specifically where that virtual machine is. So if it's sitting on your USB drive, as is this case, you can go ahead and tell Eclipse where that virtual machine is. So if we go back into our fresh version of Eclipse, so what I did is there's a pre-configured version of Eclipse that I copied and pasted that line out of, and now we're going into the clean version of Eclipse that we just extracted from the zip file, and we're going to go ahead and add that line. So just a quick explanation, here's the VM switch. This media folder right here is what Ubuntu will load to when you, or mount to, when you insert a USB drive and it detects it. This part right here is what I named my USB partition, PNY16. And then the JVMS folder is the folder that I mentioned earlier for Java virtual machines. And then this JDK is actually the name of the JDK. When I extracted the JDK, this was the folder name. It's the JDK then version. And then these subdirectories are actually the path to the virtual machine. So fairly standard. It may change over the next few years or so, but it should remain fairly static. So once we get that line in there, we can go ahead and close that file, and now Eclipse should open. And this is Kepler, that's the version. There's also Juno and a few other things. You should note your version when it opens for the first time, because it'll actually be good to know that. So here is just asking us to select a workspace. So we'll go ahead and navigate to our USB drive. And we have a workspaces folder here already. We'll go ahead and start with a new directory though. And say setup page once again. And then go ahead and select that directory. So now that Java is opening, the first thing that we're actually going to do is install the PHP tools. This specific version of PointHarbor runs on PHP. It's pretty easy to port it to the different languages because of the way the service tier works. So you could port it to Java, or you could port it to C#, etc. So once you get in the available software, go ahead and select Kepler, and then if you look through here, there'll be programming languages. If you expand that, you can go down and there'll be PHP development tools. Go ahead and select that and install it. So everything looks good except the terms, finish. And then this will go ahead and download the PHP tools. So this will enable Eclipse to open PHP files in the IDE itself, as opposed to a text editor outside of Eclipse. And it will also allow syntax highlighting and things like that for PHP. So PointHarbor has its core service tier, which Eclipse is used to both develop and then deploy. And then it has an integrated IDE in the actual web product to allow you to make dynamic changes, including with PHP. If you like the heavy syntax highlighting and everything, you can actually code within Eclipse and then copy and paste those changes into the system. So now that PHP tools are installed, we're actually going to install the Red Hat OpenShift integration tools, which will allow basically seamless integration into the OpenShift platform. So as that is happening, we can can go ahead and multitask and sign up for both an email account and an OpenShift account, just so we're going from A to B without skipping any steps and showing people what they should do from the get-go. So once this opens, go ahead and search for JBoss. And then you're looking for JBoss tools, not the integration stack, but just JBoss tools. And they actually have JBoss tools available for different versions, so pay attention to the version that you're installing. If it's Juno, select Juno. If it's Kepler, select Kepler. So here we don't need everything for this specific project. All we need is the OpenShift tools. If you find yourself needing other packages, go ahead and select them. So while this is working, we can go ahead and just, start signing up. So here, we can just say PointHarbor, and I'm just showing people if you're starting out absolutely fresh, just beginner, would like to get this set up, would like to get it going, these are all of the steps necessary to get it going. So we'll say demo, PointHarbor, demo, password. And once I get all this information in there, we can go ahead and proceed on to signing up for OpenShift. So the one thing that I'm not going to sign up for is voice. If you have text messaging, you can go ahead and put another text message in there. I'm going to utilize my voice account to get that text. So if we go back here, enter that, that should give us our account. Google Voice is just a service. If you have an existing phone number, which I believe if you don't, then you can get one through the federal government, like in New York, just with the benefits card. I believe it's federal, so I believe it's also through other people. And then you can just go and sign up through Google, get a Google Voice account. You basically get a number and then map it to your number. Once they confirm that you actually have another number, you can select like a masked number. So that's what that is, and it accepts text as well. So now that we have our email address, we can go ahead and sign up for OpenShift. So OpenShift is a hosted, they actually, I believe, call it platform as a service or something like that. But basically it allows you to set up servers on the fly with different options. So you can run Java, like JBoss tools, you can run PHP, you can run Ruby, and it's fairly convenient. The free offering actually allows you to do quite a bit. I believe that there are several limitations, such as space. So I believe you can only use up 2 gig of space. I think that I signed up for that wrong. Alright, so sign up for this again. As far as the traffic and the memory, I believe that it's sufficient to build out a fairly complex web application and at least prove it before going on to like a paid subscription. So that's why I like utilizing it. So here, just go ahead and confirm the account, accept, and now we should be up and running. Alright, now that we're signed up for OpenShift, we can go ahead and get started as it says. Jump into here, finish this process. So with Eclipse, again, it'll directly integrate with OpenShift. That will allow us to both check code in and version it. So as you're making changes to the very foundational core services in PointHarbor, then OpenShift will go ahead and keep versions for you. So if you find yourself in trouble and need to go back to a previous version, you can restore that version. So here, we can just press OK. Just a warning message saying that it's not able to verify where it's being installed from. So once we restart, the OpenShift integration tools will be installed into the IDE, and we can go ahead and get started there. So the solution is actually on GitHub. If you go to GitHub, alright, so as we're selecting a workspace, I usually select workspaces on the USB drive so I don't take up too much memory. We'll go ahead and just create another one. Say PHDemo. Go there. So this solution code is actually on GitHub. So if we go to GitHub, it'll be Anchor and then PointHarbor. Then this is where I check in the latest stable code for the very foundational of this service tier. So now that we have that open, we can go ahead and take a look at Eclipse. Go ahead and maximize it. And if you go File, New, Other, then you should see OpenShift right here. Select OpenShift. And then you're going to go ahead and type in your username that you just created. So, and the password that you just used to sign up for OpenShift. So it's going to verify our user credentials. So since this is the very first time logging into OpenShift, it's going to ask you to initialize a domain. So the format is usually application name dash domain name .rhcloud.com until you purchase another domain or utilize some other non-default functionality or configuration. So here I'm just going to point this to say like PHDemo. So it'll be application name dash PHDemo .rhcloud.com if that's available. So SSH keys basically utilizes prime numbers, two very large prime numbers, to establish the likeliness that wherever you're authenticating from is the matching partner for that configuration. So we basically take two large prime numbers, put one on the private machine, one on the public, multiply them together. If it gets the answer that both the machines are looking for, then it matches and it says this is probably the person or configuration that is supposed to be logging in. That allows secure communications between the machines so people aren't able to see your code. So we have to set up those prime numbers basically. just generate the prime numbers, so that's what this is right here. So if we go into preferences, key management, then we can generate that prime number here, put in a passphrase. This way, if someone gets that file that contains the prime number, then they'll also have to enter the password in order to access even that prime number, or the certificate, I guess is what it's called. So here, if we go show hidden files, I put a SSH directory on the USB drive. That way I carry the configuration with me if I would like to go to another machine, perhaps. So here we can just create another directory, phdemo, and then save the certificate there. So now that we've saved the certificate, we can go ahead and close that, say add existing. Here, we can just put so PNY16, since that's the USB drive the certificate is mapped to. And then if we go here, and then navigate to our certificate that we just generated, which is this one. We can go ahead and map that. So what it did is generated the prime numbers and then uploaded the other prime number to the server, and it's just confirming that for us now. So here it's going to ask us to configure the initial application. So you won't see this every time. It's basically the first time that you log into each application, you have to configure it, just like we had to initialize the domain. We're initializing the application now, or configuring it. So I'm just going to give it a real simple application name, just I. So this specific application is going to run off PHP 5.3. Again, it can be ported to Ruby, it can be ported to JBoss or Java, Tomcat's another Java server, etc. So the gear profile, this is the free subscription, so the only option we have is small. If you have a paid subscription, then you may have another possible configuration. Cron jobs will provide the scheduled jobs functionality. So that's not in the product yet. It will be soon, and I don't wish to record another video all that soon, so we're going to go ahead and include that, as well as MongoDB. That's the data tier for the solution that stores all the information in the code. And then also, as an optional component, we're going to install RockMongo, which provides scaffolding functionality for MongoDB, so it'll allow us to view all of the data inside of the database. So we'll go ahead and select those three components. Again, RockMongo is optional. So we can go ahead and create a new project. Here it's just saying that the default Git location doesn't exist. It's because we're utilizing a live CD for Ubuntu and booting off that. So we can go ahead and navigate to our USB drive, and then there is a Git location on there. Just create another PH demo again. And I believe that I somehow closed out of the application. So let's start this again. Okay, so if we go into Eclipse, we're going to copy and paste this once more. I'm not sure what happened there. I think I hit extra buttons or something. Click the mouse weird or something. log in here. So I don't believe that we'll have to reconfigure the domain name again, but this is what it usually look like if you hadn't configured Eclipse before. So here we're going to have to reselect our options. We'll skip the explanation this time and just go ahead and move forward. And then back to getting the Git workspace. So here, and now finish. I'm not sure what I did. Close the application somehow. Now it's creating our application, so what we can go ahead and do is go and get our code. So if you just click download zip, you can go ahead and get the core service code for PointHarbor. So go up one level, extract base to that Git folder. Or actually we'll just, yeah, we'll extract it. And it hasn't pulled down the code yet, so we'll switch back over here to see what it's doing. So once this finishes, then it should pull down the code from OpenShift, and then we can copy and paste that code into the project for check-in. So here, this is PointHarbor right now as, actually. Alright, back to Eclipse. So once this is created, you'll want to note your rock Mongo information. It provides your login information for the data tier, which is important. So what I usually do is go into Google Drive. And then you can just create like a spreadsheet. Go ahead and paste that information here. So actually let's do and that's our rock Mongo information. So now if we check this again, click OK. So this is just saying that the authenticity of the server can be verified for that prime number, for transferring that prime number. So you're just saying that that's alright, that it can't be verified. That can be fixed, but it's trivial for right now. If it's a concern, then you can fix it. So here I'm just typing in that password for that prime number that I was saying before, how you can password protect it. That's the password that I set for it. So I just type that in. And now it just pulled the source down from OpenShift, and now it's asking if you should push it back up to the server. So we're just gonna go ahead and press yes. So what it did is it grabbed default code from OpenShift, pulled it down to our client machine, and now it's pushing it up to the server. So now if we take a look back at what we were trying to do, you can see that we can extract our application here, and it'll show up into the UI. So if we expand this, if you give it a bit or let it refresh, then that code should show up. So after refresh, that code does show up. So here there's a config. This actually stores your MongoDB information, so go ahead and go back to that window I named my application I, my DB will be I. So set that. And then to get the host, what we're going to go ahead and do is log into RockMongo. So if you just click that the link to the UI, go ahead and log in. And this IP address right here, right on the front page, is your host. So if you go back to Eclipse, and then replace the host token, save that. That's all of the configuration needed for these services. So if we go ahead and push that now, and then you can set this information, and then it'll be set for you next time. Go ahead and select all the files, and this is just an initial check-in. So commit and push. So you can commit to the version control system without pushing to your server. So that's the difference between commit and push. Is commit puts the code into the version control system, and then commit and push will put it into the version control system and then actually put it on the server so it's live as well. So we can go ahead and just check that the application is up and running. So if we go phdemo.rhcloud.com, and then there's kind of the introductory message. So what we're going to go ahead and do is, now that we have the base services deployed, we're going to go ahead and go to this environment. So this actually works off of a module export. So what we're going to go ahead and do is just ensure all of our code right now is in a single module. So we'll set the module to PointHarbor, apply to all. And now what we're going to go ahead and do is open up the test portal. So since this is version 2 and we're still working on some of this functionality, it's the test portal instead of the portal. And then here what we do is we generate a build script. So the foundational services, it's basically a DB service, execution service, and a init service, a read service, and a save service, and that's it. All of the rest of the functionality in PointHarbor is dynamic. So what we're going to go ahead and do is set our user. So the user is just the first user that gets populated to enable access to the system. So you type in the user, and then the challenge is